Hello students, welcome back to another interesting session of Vajiram and Ravi's Daily Current Affair Analyst. Today we'll take up 5 news items, out of which the first 3 are of immense importance for the upcoming Mains 2024 examination. First, we'll take up the issue of surge in militancy in the Jammu region of Jammu and Kashmir. Second, we'll take up the issue of landslides in Kerala, which is becoming a recurrent theme over the years. Third, we'll take up the issue of the ongoing negotiations over the global pandemic treaty. Fourth, we'll take up the upcoming judgment of Supreme Court on the issue whether subclassification is possible among scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. And fifth, we'll take up the issue of plant mutation breeding, which provides an alternative to the high-cost genetic engineering technologies in pursuit of agricultural development. After that, we'll take up 4 important prelim snippets, so be sure to join in. The first issue that we'll be taking up today is the surge in militancy in the Jammu region of Jammu and Kashmir and the corresponding measures that the government has taken to tackle the problem. This topic is going to be very important for the upcoming Mains 2024 examination, GS 3 part of the syllabus that deals with role of external state and non-state actors in creating challenges for Indian internal security. So, coming up with the issue, the phenomena of militancy in Jammu and Kashmir is a relatively recent phenomena that can be traced to 1980s. Unlike what our neighbor Pakistan claims that the militancy in Jammu and Kashmir is actually a result of the illegal Indian occupation of the state. We can see this by the 1965 India-Pakistan war, in which Pakistan initiated Operation Gibraltar. The goal of this operation was to send covert spies into the Indian side of Kashmir and persuade villagers of Jammu and Kashmir to rebel against the Indian state so as to provide a justification for the Pakistani invasion. However, at that point of time, the citizens of Jammu and Kashmir instead professed their loyalty to the Indian state and got all these covert spies arrested, thus thereby failing the entire Operation Gibraltar as well as causing a very big damage to the Pakistani side in the 1965 war. So, what are the factors to which we can attribute this surge of militancy in Jammu and Kashmir over the past 4 decades? Well, the first reason happens to be the religious radicalization that took place in Jammu and Kashmir. This can be attributed to some policies of Sheikh Abdullah government, such as renaming of nearly 80,000 villages in Jammu and Kashmir and giving them names in Urdu. Another issue that was not directly attributed to by the Sheikh Abdullah government but happened simultaneously was the expansion of Jamaat-e-Islami, an organization which has now been banned under the UAPA Act, but this organization expanded rapidly in the 1980s in Jammu and Kashmir and was responsible for radicalization of the youth. Apart from that, the preference for Urdu as the official state language instead of Kashmiri was also a factor that contributed to this religious radicalization. Apart from that, it was in 1988 that under Ziaul Haq, Pakistan Army started a policy of supporting terrorism across borders in Indian Kashmir. Under Operation Tupac in 1988, this policy was formalized, and from then onwards, this has become the official state policy of Pakistan to extend support to militant groups on Indian side of the border, as well as provide them safe havens in Pakistani territories. Apart from that, another issue that was responsible for this surge in militancy in Jammu and Kashmir was disenchantment with the political process. A number of governments were overthrown by the center arbitrarily, and often in a few weeks' time or in a few months' time, these political parties would come together again. So this caused immense disenchantment amongst the public, And in 1987 election, when the Hurriyat conference decided to contest the elections, there were allegations of massive rigging, as most of the Hurriyat candidates lost, and the alliance of Farooq Abdullah and Indian National Congress emerged victorious. So in view of these massive allegations about rigging of elections, the disenchantment with political process almost reached its culmination, its peak point. Apart from that, unemployment as well happened to be one of the reasons which created hostility amongst these citizens of Jammu and Kashmir themselves, leading to the exodus of Kashmiri Pandits from the valley. Thus, these were the factors that were responsible for this surge, this shift in Jammu and Kashmir towards militancy, towards violence. Now, coming to the present shift in strategies and situations that we are seeing on the ground, we see a resurgence of militancy in Jammu and Kashmir. So let's take a look at the reasons behind that. First of all, the cult of gun has been revived in Jammu and Kashmir, specifically after the glorification of terrorists like Burhan Wani, who have received massive public sympathy in some parts of Kashmir. Apart from that, we are also seeing that the militant groups who are operating in northern part of Jammu and Kashmir, they are now trying to shift their bases to southern and eastern parts of Kashmir. What are the reasons behind this? First of all, since the abrogation of Article 370, there has been massive troop deployment in Kashmir, especially the northern part, which was the belt of militants. To avoid this increased presence of Indian troops, some of these terror groups are trying to relocate to other parts of the territory. Secondly, Jammu region. This region was made free of militancy in 2009. So, to continue this spate of violence across the state, this is a strategic shift to relocate the focus of violence and struggle to Jammu region. And thirdly, in view of the Galwan crisis, large deployment of troops took place from Jammu region to the eastern border, that is the LAC. So, there is a relative deficit of troops in the Jammu region, which has made it easier for these terror groups to seek safe haven in these new territories. Now, another reason responsible for this spate of surge in violence in Jammu and Kashmir is the abrogation of Article 370. What it essentially meant was that already the state was under governor's rule since June 2018. And with abrogation of Article 370, it has been 5 years since August 5th, 2019, when the Article 370 was abrogated. And since then, first initially, the state was under a state of heavy troop deployment and lockdown, which was followed by lockdown due to the COVID-19 virus. And consequently, we see that for a span of 6 years, there has been no state government in Jammu and Kashmir. Lastly, the political parties have been thoroughly discredited in their activities due to their activities over the years, and this we can see in the 2024 Lok Sabha election verdict also, where the two prominent state parties, National Conference and the PDP, suffered massive losses. So, with political disenchantment and continuous support from across the border, we are seeing a renewed thrust to militancy in the Jammu and Kashmir region. Now, what has been the response of the government? In the immediate context, government has decided to establish special operation group camps. These camps will involve personnel from army, local police, CRPF, and other agencies that are operating in Jammu and Kashmir. In addition to that, village defense committees have also been re-established in Jammu region, and training is being provided to use 303 rifles as well as the SLR variants. Apart from that, another focus of government is to ensure that the militants do not receive local support, as it has come to the knowledge that militants have been using hotspots and Wi-Fi of locals to communicate with their bosses across the border, as well as seek food and other ration clothings from the locals. However, the problem has to be addressed at a comprehensive level, which requires long-term measures as well. Most important measure that has to be implemented as soon as possible is the restoration of representative democracy, something which even the Supreme Court has emphasized while upholding the abrogation of Article 370. This will need to ensure that democracy is protected throughout the state at all levels, that is from state to district to taluka to even gram panchayat levels. Apart from that, economic development is the way to ensure that the youth chooses to devote their energy towards productive and economic avenues rather than violence. The state happens to be very rich when it comes to agriculture. It happens to be a great leader in production of saffron, which has huge demand across the world. It happens to be a great tourist destination that needs to be revived. Apart from that, the state is also rich in hydro reserves, hydropower, as well as mining reserves. Third step that should be taken is the establishment of Truth and Reconciliation Commissions. This suggestion was given by Justice Call in the case that was dealing with the constitutional validity of abrogation of Article 370. Now, Truth and Reconciliation Commissions were first established in South Africa after apartheid ended. And the purpose of these commissions was to bring the victim and the perpetrators of injustice face to face and bring about a reconciliation between the two communities. So the purpose of these Truth and Reconciliation Committees is to bridge the gap between the two antagonistic communities, which in this case would be the Kashmiri Pandits and the Kashmiri Muslims. Apart from that, what we see is that violence and militancy in Jammu and Kashmir emerged at a time when federal structure was coming under increasing stress, and we see parallel developments in Punjab, Tamil Nadu, and even in West Bengal as well. So, resolution of center-state issues has to be pursued, and lastly, the aim of the Indian government has to be to win the hearts and minds of the people through their diverse sorts of socio-economic development as well as cultural integration activities. Now, taking up the question that can come from this topic for the upcoming Mains 2024 examination, trace the historical and contemporary factors behind the persistence of militancy in Jammu and Kashmir and suggest measures to address the same. Treat this as a 15 marker and try to write it in 250 words. The second topic for the day is the issue of landslides that are taking place in Kerala in face of heavy rainfall. Wayanad district has been very devastated by this landslide issues and has resulted in a significant loss of life and property. This topic is important for GS1 part of main syllabus that deals with geophysical phenomena, which is landslide, as well as for GS3 that deals with disaster and disaster management. So, coming to the issues, first we have to understand the factors that are involved in making Kerala so vulnerable to issues such as floods, landslides, and environmental degradation. Firstly, it has been observed that forest cover in Kerala has been on the decline. In fact, according to the International Journal of Environment and Public Health, Kerala has lost over 60% of its forest from 1950 to 2018. Okay, apart from that, the Ministry of Earth Sciences has told the Lok Sabha that Kerala has recorded the maximum number of landslides in the last 7 years. Lastly, ISRO's landslide atlas. This has also noted down that Wayanad, the Wayanad district, happens to be ranked 5th all across Kerala in terms of vulnerability towards the issue of landslides. Some issues are also involved which are yet to be clearly measured and ascertained, but we can see their impact, such as the warming of Arabian Sea. Now this phenomena has resulted in increase in convective rainfall. Now this convective rainfall is categorized by short but intense bouts of rainfall. That is, heavy rainfall takes place in a very short duration of time, and it is precisely such kind of rainfall that can lead to geological instability in hilly and mountainous regions of Kerala. Thirdly, the issue is that of fragile terrain as well. Roughly half of the land area of Kerala comprises of hills and mountains, on which the slope exceeds almost even 20 degrees. So that slope is even more than 20 degrees. So in such a landscape, we can visualize why we see the issue of recurrent floods and landslides taking place in Kerala. Now coming to the response from government has taken a slew of measures to tackle this issue. First was the establishment of Madhav Gadgil committee, and the report submitted by this committee was to declare the entire Western Ghats as an ecologically sensitive area under the Environment Protection Act of 1986. This is what was suggested by Madhav Gadgil committee. In addition to that, it was suggested that whether the district or the area is going to be categorized as ecologically sensitive area 1, 2 or 3, this is to be determined at block level, block or taluka level. So it asked a very minute assessment across the region to ascertain whether which area is to be taken part of which kind of protection. Now, the third thing that Madhav Gadgil committee report suggested was a ban on all polluting industries. That is, all industries that fall under red or orange categories should be denied permission to set up operations in Western Ghats, and those industries that are currently operating in the Western Ghats, they should be asked to relocate their operations and end their operations within the vicinity of Western Ghats by 2016. So these measures were actually quite far-sighted and would have ensured preserving and maintenance of the integrity of the Western Ghats. However, the states were reluctant to follow these recommendations. Consequently, K. Kasturi Rangan committee was established, and the report presented by this committee limited the declaration of ecological sensitive area to 37% of Western Ghats. At the same time, it also restricted only industries that fall under the red category. So only industries that fall under the red category would be prohibited from operating within the Western Ghats. Unfortunately, even though this report was much more moderate compared to Madhav Gadgil reports in its recommendations, there hasn't been any consensus yet between the states and between center and states over its implementation, and consequently both the reports largely remain unimplemented. Kerala has been a victim of these environmental calamities recurrently over the past years. However, it has not been able to learn from these past mistakes and create and prevent such disasters in future. We can see this by the fact that there is no landslide mitigation plan within the state, even though the state does have landslide prone maps. That is, it has mapped districts which are prone to landslides, but yet there is no landslide mitigation plan in place. Furthermore, in this recent landslide event that took place in Wayanad, we came across a scenario where equipment for Bailey bridges, these are emergency pontoon bridges that have to be built to ensure connectivity. So building these Bailey bridges, the material for building these Bailey bridges was being sent from Delhi. So again, this again is an issue that relief material and the material for disaster relief work is being supplied centrally, which again is a cause of concern. This should be available readily on site to ensure prompt and quick action. Now, what should be the way forward of Indian government and Kerala government to address this issue? Priority has to be to build resilience in the local community with respect to agriculture, mining, settlement patterns. It has to be emphasized to local communities as well as to the state government and to the economic actors working in the area that only when environment and development proceeds together can we ensure sustainable development. Technology should be leveraged in, such as rain gauges, piezometers, inclinometers, and these technological devices should be distributed across district and taluka levels to ensure that real-time measurement and action can be taken when such incidents happen. There is a need to build consensus and finally implement K. Kasturi Rangan report, at least, if not the Madhav Gadgil committee report. And lastly, post-disaster needs assessment, something that was recommended by the 15th Finance Commission, needs to take place. This assessment is important to ensure that the cost of relief and rehabilitation is supplemented by support from central government as well. So with this, we move on to the question that can come from this topic in the upcoming mains 2024 examination. You can try the sample question. Illustrate how landslides are as much a natural disaster as an anthropogenic calamity. Treat this as a 10 marker. And you have to bring out both the aspects which make it a natural disaster and aspects which make it responsible, which make it an anthropological disaster. Coming to the third topic for the day, we will be discussing the pandemic treaty that is being negotiated by the intergovernmental negotiating body under the aegis of World Health Organization. This negotiating body, although has not been able to yet produce a final draft, it has delivered remarkable outcomes in this session, and it is likely that a final draft will be available by 2025. The topic is important for GS2 part of the syllabus that deals with bilateral, regional and global groupings and agreements involving India and or affecting India's interests. Another part of GS2 which is linked to this topic is that of issues related to development and management of social sector, social services such as health. So, coming to the issue, the objective of the treaty is to strengthen pandemic prevention, preparedness and response. Now, first of all, we need to develop an understanding of what essentially a pandemic is. Health emergencies are graded in 3 categories by WHO. These are epidemic. Now, an epidemic refers to a situation where a disease is spreading rapidly but in a limited geographical area. Limited geographical area. Such a case is categorized as an epidemic. However, when a transmission of disease starts to cross regional boundaries and has the potential to impact the entire globe, such a condition is referred to as a pandemic. So the difference between an epidemic and a pandemic is not essentially about the severity, but rather the reach. To what extent is it affecting the international world? And the third category is that of endemic, when a disease has become stable and limited to one particular region, such as malaria in parts of sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. Now, the current framework to deal with health emergencies was established in 2005 as international health regulations. Now, the process followed under these international health regulations is, as soon as the World Health Organization deems a disease to be becoming a pandemic, a public health emergency of international concern is declared. Following that, an emergency committee of experts is established to assist WHO in formulating the appropriate responses. Now, on the right hand side, you will see 7 public health emergencies of international concern have been designated by WHO over the years, and the most recent one was in 2022 dealing with monkeypox. So, moving on to what is the need of this treaty, especially now. As we know, the world is just recovering from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, and it is this experience of last 3 years which has shaped this urgency towards achieving a global pandemic treaty for a coordinated response across the world. What were the conditions that we witnessed in this period of COVID-19 pandemic? First of all, we see that the recognition of threat was very late. We had evidences of a potential pandemic emerging in China's Wuhan province as early as December 2019, but it was only in February 2020 that WHO started to take serious action. By the time it was too late and we resorted to knee-jerk measures such as closing all international travel and imposing lockdowns across countries, the lockdown actually had a very big impact, not just in terms of economy, but also with respect to psychological and mental health of individuals. Loss of wealth and life due to lockdown as well as due to the virus was immense and something that has shocked the world. Lastly, the inequity when it came to distribution of vaccine and remedial measures made it clear that a coordinated response needs to be achieved to counter and prevent pandemics in future, and so as also to ensure that the differentiated impact on the global north versus global south is minimized. So what we saw during the pandemic was that while the global north was managed to keep its wealth intact, it was the global south that had to face the additional burden of debt and debt sustainability, which is going to create long-term consequences for the global south countries. So to prevent such a calamity from happening again in future of this magnitude, a coordinated response is necessary, and this global pandemic treaty is precisely an effort to create a platform and a framework to achieve this global coordinated response. Now, what could be the possible benefits once this treaty is finally formalized and accepted by all? First of all, this is going to prioritize building resilience in our society to pandemics. So, the idea is that we cannot prevent completely emergence of new diseases and potential pandemics. However, we have to orient our lifestyle, our economy, our society to such a pattern that we are able to stay resilient even in face of future pandemics. Apart from that, preventing, detection and response has to be at the center of this global coordinated response, and this can be achieved by this treaty. Thirdly, the treaty is expected to provide sustainable and predictable funding towards health sector, something which the global south countries are very much in need of. And lastly, the treaty is expected to establish a framework that will ensure that all countries, irrespective of their economic status, have equal access to countermeasures such as vaccines, diagnostic tools, and medicines. So now with respect to the ongoing negotiations between 196 countries that are part of WHO, 3 contentious issues have emerged which are delaying the creation or acceptance of a final draft of the treaty. What are these? First issue is that of pathogen access and benefit sharing. Now, this issue essentially says that the emerging threats are likely to emerge in the low and middle income countries of the world due to a myriad of reasons, such as poverty, closer ties or proximity with livestock and wild animals, lower rates of vaccine coverage, and so on. So it is expected that future pandemics or viruses with pandemic potential are likely to emerge in these low and middle income countries, and it is these countries who are going to provide these strains of these viruses, and it is from these low and middle income countries that the developed countries seek to get access to these pathogens and in turn develop vaccines diagnostic tools, and remedial medicines. So we see this is a complementary process which involves both the low and middle income countries as well as the developed countries. However, the issue with respect to sharing in the benefits that come from sharing the strains of the viruses with pandemic potential, this is an issue that has been a bone of contention between Global South and Global North. While Global South is trying to emphasize that at least 20% of all vaccines, diagnostic tools, and remedial measures should be donated by these developed countries to WHO, so as to ensure that those in need are also able to access these remedial measures. However, there are views from the Global North that instead of minimum criteria of 20%, 20% should be the maximum amount of remedial measures that should be donated by these developed countries to the WHO. And within this Global North also, there are few countries who feel that even 20% is a very high figure. Second issue that has been a hold up in fructifying this treaty is that of technology transfer. It has been emphasized by the Global South that in absence of technical know-how to produce vaccines, diagnostic tools, and medicines, the Global South countries will remain on charity and at the mercy of the developed countries. Now, this is something that can be countered only if the low and middle income countries of the world are close to achieving self-sufficiency in these essential goods. Self-sufficiency in these essential public goods, and this requires access to the technical know-how that is possessed by the developed countries. Furthermore, this exchange of or this transfer of technology is also important to diversify the supply chains so that future pandemic shocks do not cripple the manufacturing capacity of the entire world. Now, the third issue which has been a hold-up in fruition of this treaty is that of One Health approach that seeks to follow an integrated approach with respect to health that deals with humans, animals, and environment in simultaneous and comprehensive manner. Now, as we have already discussed, that it is likely that pathogens with pandemic potential are likely to emerge in the low and middle income countries. The developed countries recognize the need to adopt this One Health approach. However, following this One Health approach is often deemed by some of the countries of the Global South as an undue burden. Expanding healthcare facilities and pursuing healthcare in an integrated manner is going to create a demand for funds which these Global South countries currently lack, and there is no predictable or guaranteed mechanism to assure flow of funds from the developed countries to the Global South. So in absence of this assured mechanism of flow of funds, it is likely that if the countries of Global South take up this responsibility or take up this commitment to pursue One Health approach, it may end up creating a financial burden on them. Now, it must not be the activities of the intergovernmental negotiating body should not be viewed only from the issue of failures. They have achieved considerable success on a number of issues. First of all, out of over 300 amendments that were proposed, several amendments have been accepted to the International Health Regulations of 2005 that seek to ensure that the Global South is better prepared and equipped to respond to future pandemics. At the same time, it has been acknowledged that equitable access to health products is important. What is being negotiated right now is the quantum and the mechanism through which this access is going to be ensured. Thirdly, the issue of financial mobilization and allocation across the world is something that has been recognized in this amendment to the International Health Regulations of 2005. Now, most importantly, one amendment that has been very crucial is that a mandate to create a national international health regulation authority that is going to serve the function of monitoring, reporting, and verification. So this body, this authority, National International Health Regulation Authority, is going to ensure that at national level the tenets of the regulations are being complied by both national as well as state level governments and even the local governments. Lastly, one of the successes of this meeting between intergovernmental negotiating body was that the mandate of the INB has been extended to indefinitely. That is, instead of being limited to a time, this body is going to continue to meet until a final draft of the treaty is prepared. So, what should be the way forward to bring about this consensus between the global north and global south? First of all, a conference of parties similar to the UNFCCC COP can be established under this mechanism, and just like the conference of parties of UNFCCC serves the purpose to take global stock take, a similar COP can be scheduled for the pandemic treaty as well, which is going to ensure and take stock of commitments and adherence to those commitments by countries across the globe. Second issue is that it is important to understand that diversifying and enhancing regional manufacturing capabilities is going to serve the larger interests of collective mankind. This is going to prevent one future pandemic shock from crippling the entire manufacturing capabilities of the world. And lastly, the reciprocal relationship between pathogen access and benefit sharing and technology transfer has to be recognized. That is, only when the developing countries and the countries of the global south willingly share strain and genome data of pathogens with pandemic potential with the developed countries can they develop remedial measures. At the same time, if the developed countries are willingly sharing technological know-how and supporting the manufacturing capabilities in global south, the requirement under PABS, that is pathogen access and benefit sharing, to donate a specific portion of vaccines, diagnostic tools and medicines to WHO will reduce, because these countries, that is the countries of global south with enhanced manufacturing capabilities, are likely to be able to meet their own demands on their own. So this complementarity between pathogen access and benefit sharing and technology transfer has to be recognized and backed by all countries. This topic again is important with reference to upcoming mains 2024 examination. So you can try this question: do you agree that a global pandemic treaty can avert another COVID-19 like pandemic in the future? Give your reasons for that. Treat this as a 10 marker and highlight what could be the possible outcomes of this treaty that can help counter a future pandemic. Next, we'll take up the fourth issue for the day, that is subclassification among scheduled castes and scheduled tribe. Supreme Court is going to deliver its verdict on whether states and center can subclassify or subcategorize scheduled castes and scheduled tribes like it is being done in case of OBCs. Now this topic is relevant for GS1 social empowerment and GS2 that deals with welfare schemes for vulnerable sections of the population. So coming to the idea of subclassification, first we should understand the theory of distributive justice. This was given by John Rawls, and this theory precisely tries to balance the demand or importance that is attributed to merit with that of social justice. So the philosophy underlying this theory is that once a basic minimum level of needs of everybody is satisfied, only then can we allow merit to be a determinant of acquired wealth or acquired material wealth. So only when basic level of material needs necessary to live a human life and live a life with dignity are ensured, only then can we allow merit to become the determinant of material wealth. With this, we now take a look at the evolution of reservation system in India. So the reservation system in India has been enshrined in the constitution framed by Baba Saheb Ambedkar, and it deals with three pillars. First pillar is that of political reservation, in which Article 330, 332, 334 are included, which reserve seats for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in accordance to their population at both national level as well as at state level. Now, this idea of political reservation was first recognized in Pune Pact of 1933, in which Dr. Ambedkar, on behalf of the Dalit community, gave up their demand for separate electorates and agreed to contest on joint electorates, provided a minimum number of seats were reserved for Dalit candidates. That is, only a Dalit candidate could contest from these reserved seats, but the entire general population, the entire population of the district, that would of the constituency, that would include all sections of the society, Dalits, upper castes, individuals of different religions, all would be voting for the candidate. Now, the issue of economic justice is also important in this philosophy, in which Article 15 and 16 play a major role in laying the foundation of reservations in sphere of public education and employment. And thirdly, the issue of social justice, that is the issue of identifying what are the castes and groups who are in need for special treatment. This is taken up by the Article 338, 338A and 338B, which establishes national commissions for scheduled castes, scheduled tribes and other backward classes or castes respectively. Now, the issue of categorization of different groups under these labels, such as, or under these categories as scheduled caste, scheduled tribes or OBCs, is taken up in accordance with Article 341, 341A and 342A. This is very important with respect to the issue of categorization. How? According to Article 341 and 341A, it is the President who is going to notify a list of SCs and STs, and once he has notified a list, any amendment or modification to this list can be made only by Parliament. However, with respect to Article 342A, the power to make a list for other backward castes or classes is given to both Union as well as to the state. So it is precisely this aspect, that there is just a single list of communities included in scheduled castes and scheduled tribes maintained at the union or central level, whereas at the state level, whereas with respect to the OBCs, there is a separate list of OBCs as per central list and corresponding state lists. So it is with this that the idea of subcategorization in OBCs has been accepted, has been allowed. However, same has not been done for scheduled castes as well as for the scheduled tribes. This issue was taken up in E.V. Chennaiya case, E.V. Chennaiya versus State of Andhra Pradesh case, in which it was held that scheduled castes are a homogeneous group. That is, the criteria for identification of any particular group as a scheduled caste group is that they have been suffering from the practice of untouchability. So it was ruled in this judgment that since the causative factor for identification of scheduled castes as for the identification of any group as scheduled castes is one, that is untouchability, hence they have to be treated as a homogeneous group. Now this is being tested by the Supreme Court, and let's have a look at the reasons that are being given in favor of subcategorization or subclassification. Firstly, while reserving its judgment, even Supreme Court has acknowledged that in absence of subcategorization among scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, there is a possibility that the advanced sections within these respective categories may end up grabbing all the benefits. Apart from that, the argument of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes being a homogeneous group comes under serious question when we take a look at the cultural heritage and the identity of various subgroups that fall under these bracket categories of scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. All these subgroups have their own cultural heritage and identity, and to ignore that and the corresponding level of relative deprivation when it comes to education, employment and political representation is something that would be unfair. So it is important that subclassification within scheduled caste and scheduled tribe can be one way to acknowledge the diverse cultural heritage, identity and the relative levels of deprivations amongst the subgroups within this larger one group. Further, this will also be a platform to allow targeted policies to counter or tackle these relative deprivations between various subgroups in scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. That is, social groups who are more deprived will amongst these larger categories, they would require more targeted policies, and identification of these subcategories is one way to ensure that. Lastly, a similar policy is in place for OBCs in several states, where OBCs have been divided into different categories based on their relative deprivations. So the argument is that the same principle should be extended to scheduled castes and scheduled tribes as well. However, there are certain concerns that are included here, such as politicization of this demand. This can create an issue where caste-based political parties can proliferate, and this can even lead to social antagonism between various subgroups, especially over the issue of claims or proportion of claims out of the total reserved pool. And lastly, the issue of error in subclassification. While the categories of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes have been created in a homogeneous fashion by referring to larger principles, the issue of subcategorization will require to note down minute differences between various subgroups. And it is in this process that an error is likely to be made, and this is something that we see even today within these three broad categories of scheduled castes, scheduled tribes and OBCs also. There are several groups who have been put in OBC category, but they are claiming that they deserve scheduled caste or scheduled tribe status, and vice versa. With this, we take up the last issue of the day, that is of plant mutation breeding. A joint venture between Mahiko and Rice Tech is promising a way for a climate smart and sustainable agriculture. This issue is important with respect to the GS3 part of the syllabus, dealing with science and technology development and their application in everyday life. So before we get into the issue of joint venture, let's have a look at the various approaches with respect to creation of genetically modified organisms. Now, genetically modified organisms can be classified in the following three ways. First is the transgenic organisms or transgenic method, in which foreign genome, that is a genome of some other organism, is introduced in the genome of the target species to impart desirable traits. Second type of method to create genetically modified organism is that of genome editing, in which no foreign genome is added. However, the existing genome of the organism is altered through genetic editing to impart favorable traits. In contrast to both these methods, mutation breeding is much closer to conventional breeding. That is, it does not involve the use of extensive principles of biotechnology. It is a simple process in which the seeds of the plant are exposed to radiation, and it is this radiation that in turn leads to changes in the genome structure of the organism or the plant, and it is this changed genome structure which imparts desirable characteristics. So without adopting the technique of genome editing or biotechnology, this approach resembles more closely the conventional breeding practices. Now, what are the advantages of mutation breeding over other genetically modified organisms? Firstly, there is no use of foreign genetic material. The entire composition of the genome of the organism remains its own. Secondly, it is a high technology but low cost method that does not involve using expensive methods of biotechnology. Thirdly, it is a quick and trusted and robust method which has gained acceptance across the world. Now, what is the precise significance of this joint venture? First of all, the full page DSR cropping solution. This is of Rice Tech Incorporated. This solution provides a way of faster adoption of direct seeded rice that is going to reduce labor requirements as well as resource consumption, that is water and fertilizers. Savanna type of crops, that is Sava 134 and Sava 127, are being promoted under this package by Rice Tech Corporation. This is to be combined with the Mahiko product, that is free hit zero tillage technology. That is, this technology allows the cultivation of the next crop, that is wheat, without the need of tilling the soil or dealing with the stubble left by paddy crop or rice crop before. And in this, the Gol and Mukut varieties are being proposed to be used as a solution. So combining these two technologies, that is the full page DSR cropping solution, that is direct seeded rice solution, along with the free hit zero tillage technology, it is proposed that the rice wheat system can be made more climate smart and sustainable, and at the same time reduce their resource consumption as well. One important issue is that both these varieties are herbicide tolerant. However, herbicide tolerance in these varieties has been introduced through mutation breeding and not through biotechnology or genetic editing. These plants will be resistant to the herbicide imazethhyper, and this is a herbicide which is not banned by India. Compare it with the HTBT, herbicide tolerant BT cotton variety, which is tolerant to glyphosate herbicide. Now, this herbicide has been limited for restricted use by the Indian government and has been identified as a potential carcinogenic. That is, it can cause cancer among farmers. So this is another advantage, that the herbicide that is being promoted in this case is not considered as harmful as glyphosate. And lastly, the joint venture and both the companies have displayed a willingness on their part to share their herbicide tolerant trait to other seed companies as well. So with this, we conclude the session. We conclude the discussion of the mains articles. These are the 4 prelim snippets topics that we'll be taking up today. First topic is that of zombie GNA. It is that part of our genome that cannot replicate itself and neither can it produce functional proteins. This region is also known as endogenous retrovirus, and it is believed to be remnants of retrovirus genetic material. Now, retrovirus, which is an RNA-based organism, this RNA, the genome of these retroviruses, the genome of these viruses usually cannot integrate with the human genome, which is a DNA-based genome. However, there are 2 enzymes present in these retroviruses that allow for this. These are, firstly, reverse transcriptase. This enzyme allows the conversion of RNA-based genetic material of the retrovirus into its corresponding DNA form. And once converted into this DNA form of genetic material got integrated with the human genome through the enzyme through the enzyme integrase. So this is through these two enzymes that the genetic material of retroviruses came to be incorporated in human genome. It is estimated that as of today, around 8% of human genome comprises of endogenous retroviruses or this zombie DNA. Now, the importance of this endogenous retrovirus or the zombie DNA portion of our genome is that it is a very important biomarker when it comes to preeclampsia. This is a condition in which the blood pressure becomes very high during the stage of pregnancy. Furthermore, it is also linked to the formation of tumors in colorectal cancers, and therefore study of this part of the genome has some very interesting answers for us lying in the future. Now, second topic for the day is Tarang Shakti. This is Indian Air Force's largest multilateral exercise, and it is going to be conducted in two phases. The first phase is going to be in August 2024, and it is going to take place in Sulur, Tamil Nadu. Whereas the second phase will start in September 2024, and it is to take place in Jodhpur, Rajasthan. 18 countries are expected to participate in this Tarang Shakti exercise, with 10 countries expected to join with assets, that is with their aircrafts and war equipments. Now the issue of ransomware. Ransomware is a type of malware, and it is designed to deny users and organizations access to vital data and information that is stored on their own computer. That is, they cannot access files or information which is available on their own computer. And as the name suggests, the ransomware software demands a ransom in exchange for restoring access to this data. On the screen you can see this is an image of what happens when a system or a computer is under ransomware attack, and the ransom is usually demanded in Bitcoin or some other form of currency, cryptocurrency, or some other form of and the examples of ransomware include Akira, Lockbit, WannaCry. These are some of the ransomwares which we have seen in news over the years. Lastly, now we'll take up the organization Hamas. Hamas's origin can be traced to the Muslim Brotherhood movement of 1920s, which took place in Egypt. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt had started to establish its contact with the Palestinian leadership in 1920s itself. However, the lead Palestinian organization, which was PLO, established in 1964. So, PLO stands for Palestinian Liberation Organization, and it adhered to a form of secular nationalism, and precisely because of this adherence to secular nationalism, there was always tension between Muslim Brotherhood and the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Now, following the first Intifada, that is final struggle, in 1987 to end the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories. After this first Intifada, Hamas was founded as the radical end of the Palestinian liberation movement, while the PLO continued to adhere to the moderate policies for pursuing liberation of Palestine. Now we can see that over the years there has been a moderation in the character of Hamas as well. The 1988 charter that was adopted by the organization was explicitly anti-Semitic, and the professed aim of the organization was to restore all Palestinian territories from Jordan to Mediterranean Sea. And it is this idea which is capsulated in the phrase from sea to sea. And as we can see, when we are talking about liberating Palestinian territories from Jordan to the Mediterranean, this in fact is an indirect reference to ending or annihilating the state of Israel. However, it was in 2017 that Hamas adopted a new charter, and it forgo all these anti-Semitic tendencies and propaganda that were included in the 1988 charter, so as to gain greater acceptance at the international stage. Now, the high point in career of Hamas, in the struggle of, and in the existence of Hamas, was the 2006 Palestinian elections, in which the Hamas managed to secure a majority, and the Fatah faction of PLO lost. However, the Fatah faction of PLO refused to accept the verdict, and since then the Palestinian territories came to be divided into under two governing authorities. The Hamas continued to govern the Gaza territories, whereas the Fatah faction of PLO, it continues to govern the West Bank territories that remain of Palestine. So this is the history of Hamas, and with this we end today's session. I hope this was a fruitful session for all of you, and if you have any doubts, please feel free to reach out to us.